Okay. So Maxine is Ada.
Maxine or Ada. I go, most people call me
Okay.
Ada. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. My name is Anita Russo, and I'm your conductor for this afternoon's discussion. Very, very happy to have you all here, and really looking forward to what you have to say. Your both films were just so powerful and emotional for me, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So I think we'll start out by, excuse me, if all of you would introduce yourselves and your movie. So I think I have them straight, but and who's with whom. But if you could do that first, and just say a little bit about your movie, and then we'll go back and talk about each movie in depth. Might be a good way to start. And Steve, you're up in my screen. You're up in that left-hand corner. So why don't you start? Could you start by introducing yourself and your movie?
Sure. My name is Steve Hamm, and I'm a freelance writer and a documentary filmmaker, and I live in New Haven. And I've actually made several films, one about immigration, one about policing, and now this one about opioids. And my whole focus in filmmaking is about what I consider community building films that are aimed at solving problems and bringing people together so that they can understand problems better and they can take action to solve them. And Fentanyl Madness, I won't go into, there's a kind of a longer description, but just in this introduction, the focus here was on fentanyl, which is a synthetic form of heroin and has been the leading killer of people in overdoses in Connecticut and elsewhere around the country. And the focus in the film was a lot on the families and the people who were suffering from this, and mainly from moms. And Ada, fortunately, Ada's son Dylan is in recovery, but a lot of the other moms that were featured, their children died.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And sticking with that film, Ada, do you want to continue? Introduce yourselves and say some more about the film at this point.
Hi, my name is Maxine Ada Haines, and I was asked to participate in the film that Steve, was a documentary, obviously, and my son Dylan participated along with other people. As Steve said, it was, I think what Steve tried to do, and Steve let me know if I'm speaking out of, if I'm not right, but Steve tried to get people who were in different, like some people that were in the city, some that were in the country, some that were in the, in suburbia. So he tried to get different types of people. And he tried to put in the film how everybody was affected. And it just showed, the film was so powerful for me because it showed that, nobody, this film has, it has touched so many people's lives. It doesn't matter where you live or, how you are, as far as economically or anything. It just touched everybody. And as Steve said, I am fortunate. My son is still alive right now and he's in recovery, but I still live in the fear of relapsing. So thank you.
Okay. And it's Tory, right? Tory?
Yes.
Could you, and yours is the Uprooting of Addiction?
Uprooting Addiction, yes.
And could you introduce us to that film?
Sure. My name is Tory Jadow. I was the director and co-producer of Uprooting Addiction. The film follows 6 people with vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds. They're all kind of local to where we filmmakers live. There were 3 of us, Edie Schechter, who's here, and Hope Payson. and the group is mostly from the northwest corner of Connecticut, with one person just over the New York State border. We follow their journey. The film starts when all of them are at a retreat in recovery. The retreat is led by Hope Payson, and Rob is here. He was one of the people at the retreat. And thank you, Rob, for dropping in. And we kind of follow their journey, their struggles, how childhood trauma was kind of at the root of their addictions. And we also bring in local activists, experts, law enforcers, to kind of weigh in on how how our community is reacting and responding to this public health crisis.
Okay, thank you. And Edie, would you like to add some more to that?
Tory, yes, I'm the executive producer on Uprooting Addiction, and Tory's covered most of what the film is about, but we did try to pull in a real connection between childhood trauma and its a relationship to addiction and different forms of addiction. And I think that what we wanted to leave people with, all the participants in our film are and were in recovery. And we try to leave the audience with a hopeful outlook and a different perspective on what people that suffer from addiction go through and what they look like. As Steve was also saying, it covers a lot of ground. So that's all I would add.
And Rob?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Rob Funkhouser from Canaan, Connecticut, and I was one of the subjects of Tory, Edie, and Hope's film. I am a recovering opiate addict. I think my story may have fit in well because my story is unfortunately fairly common. I had several back surgeries in the early 2000s, which led me to the use of pain medication, and very quickly, into addiction, something I have struggled with for nearly 20 years or 18 years. I've got about almost 2.5 years clean now, but it was a great format for me to see other people from different, because it's such an isolating and lonely disease. To be there, to make a film, to be part of this, a panel discussion in the beginning, it was something I think is just, is really warranted in addiction. It's that connection piece, and I think that's what Tory and Edie tried to put across in the film. I'm just proud to have been a part of it.
Okay, great. Excuse me. And we're joined by Gloria. And is Gloria with the film crew? Is she with one of the films?
Ours.
I'm sorry?
Not with ours.
Okay, all right. So she's just watching. Okay. So what I'd like to do is go into into depth on the two films. I was amazed that in Connecticut for the film festival that we had 2 films, both fantastic films, dealing with this whole fentanyl crisis in the same year. It was just, wow. And they were dealt with from different approaches, and which I find very interesting too. But obviously they had commonality throughout. So I'd like to start with, Steve, can we go back to you and again, and get some more detail of what you did, what you tried to set out to do, and so on. And then we'll switch over to the Uprooting Addiction people and let them flesh out theirs, and then we can kind of open it up from that point. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Steve, you want to kick us off then?
Yeah. So I mentioned that I am a freelance journalist, and one of my regular gigs is to write for Yale School of Medicine. And I wrote a number of stories about their work, talking to people in addiction medicine, in emergency medicine, and in public health. And what came away from all of that was the theme of the film. And the theme of the film is most of what people think they know about opioid addiction is wrong and with fatal consequences. And it really focuses, it starts with stigma.
Right.
Because of stigma, many people don't seek treatment. And also because of stigma, if people seek treatment, often it's the wrong kind of treatment. Very often people seek detox and abstinence-based approaches, unless even though they work less than 10% of the time. And there are other options. Medicine-based treatment combined with counseling works 60 to 80% of the time. And when people try abstinence and they relapse, what happens is they might overdose. And because of fentanyl, when you overdose, your chances of dying are higher. So we came up with the motto, stigma plus fentanyl equals death. And I'm a journalist, and everything I do is a call to action. And the call to action in this film is to help people empathize with people who suffer from substance abuse problems, to empathize with their families, and to understand that the gut reaction that many people have, the sense of shame, is the enemy. And that only by understanding the evidence-based treatments and by seeking MAT and counseling will most people actually be able to conquer their addiction. So it's very didactic, and that's what we tried to do. And I thought that it's kind of didactic can be cold. So that's why we told the story primarily through the families and primarily through the mothers, because when mothers tell the stories of what's happened to their children, people get it in the heart.
I also noticed that you pretty much covered all of Connecticut in your filming. I recognize, having lived in Connecticut for most of my adult life, recognized a number of different places there. And they were different types of locations, those rich pockets and then those poor pockets of places that every state has. And it was clear that fentanyl doesn't have boundaries, and it's everywhere.
Yeah, we call it an equal opportunity killer. And I did want to show that this is something that affects every kind of person. And the history of people looking at the drug problem in America, often it's been associated with people in the inner city and with Black and brown people. And frankly, until it became with fentanyl and opioids and OxyContin, something that affected everybody, it really wasn't seen in the same way. Back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, the answer to the drug problem was just say no on one hand and lock them up on the other hand. And those two strategies were fatally flawed and have led to disastrous results for individuals and for society. When you think about the effect on in poor inner city neighborhoods, you think about a generation or two of men being separated from their families, from their children growing up without those dads. That was an incredibly disastrous strategy. It was it was racist, and it had terrible impacts that we still feel. I went to try to find a Black or Latino family that would cooperate with me with this film. I spent a year and a half doing that, and I failed. And that's in spite of the fact that I have a lot of connections in the Black and Latino community in New Haven and elsewhere. And what people told me was, we are so sick of being labeled as the drug problem that we're not playing the game. And so ultimately there's some Black and brown people in it, but not in the same kind of role as the family being focused on.
Mhm.
And I think that was regrettable, but I understand why people said no to that.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Tory, would you take us now to your film and flesh out what your focus was and so on?
Sure. We wanted to do a couple of things similar. Some of them are similar to Steve's film. We definitely wanted to put a sort of human face on addiction. We wanted to show that it doesn't discriminate, and that it's now in all over the country, in small towns and cities, in all kinds of communities. But we also have a line in our film that's spoken by a Black person who says, nobody started paying attention until white people started dying.
Mm-hmm.
And we love that line because it really feels true. That being said, it does need to be paid attention to now because it's so pervasive. And I think we're up to 140 people dying daily in opioid-related overdoses. So anyway, that was one thing, that just the fact that it doesn't discriminate. So we did make an effort to have a varied group that we followed. The other thing, stigma is also a big part of it. We wanted our subjects to kind of, I mean, they were so great. This really came from them, from Rob and the others. They were so open and courageous with sharing their stories that what we've heard in feedback screenings and other screenings. Wait a minute, did we lose Edie? I'm sorry, 1 second. She is texting me. She's being asked for the passcode to get back in. Can you let her, I don't know what happened to her. Is there something we have to do?
I just got a message that Edie is still here, but her video is turned off.
She should, there is no passcode. She should
No.
sign out and sign back in.
Okay, you hear that, Edie? Click out completely and then click that link again and we'll let you back in if you're good. Anyway, so back to what I was saying, the just by virtue of people, of our people like Rob sharing their stories so openly, I think we sent a message of, shame is not productive. The way you're going to help yourself and others is to just be open about what you've been through, what your struggles are. And that has been a reaction from a lot of people where we've that have come up after screenings and said, it's just so helpful to see we're not alone. We're not the only ones, struggling or feeling this way or feeling isolated or feeling like we've failed at life or we are no good or we have no value, because this wonderful group of participants in our film are so obviously great people. I mean, that just comes across because they are, and so I think it's comforting and it gives hope to others, and also family members and loved ones that they're saying, well, if Ryan could do it, if Rob can do it, they see themselves in this diverse group, and I think it gives them hope that there's that recovery is possible, and that stigma really has no place. As Steve was saying, it is just so destructive. And you saw the same thing with the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. Silence equals death. You know, it just doesn't, the dialogue has to be open to reach solutions. Now we've lost Edie altogether. Oh well, I guess she's going to sign back in.
She signed off, just emailed her the link again.
Oh, does she need?
Kevin is
she has
saying
it though.
that,
She needs it again, she said.
no.
Oh, okay. I
Kevin,
thought she has
Kevin,
it.
I'm sorry, Kevin just sent me a message that said he is sending her the link again. She's signing back in.
Okay, thanks. So, and the other thing, we had two other sort of big key themes in our movie. And one was the connection, as Edie mentioned earlier, between childhood trauma and trauma in general. I mean, it doesn't always have to happen in childhood, but the connection between trauma and addiction. And, you know, there's always been, it seems like that theme has been relegated to vets, to, you know, war vets, because they come home with PTSD and, oh, of course they're now alcoholics or drug users or whatever. Especially after the Vietnam War, that was kind of a pervasive theme. But it's not just the domain of you know, soldiers suffering from PTSD. Unfortunately, our society has a lot of dysfunction and a lot of families. You know, there's a lot of trauma going on in all sectors of our society, and you know, Rob can speak a lot more to this, but he shares some of that in the movie, and you know, it kind of sets you up to be vulnerable to addiction and other forms of ways of sort of numbing the pain of past, you know, past hurts and traumas. And so we wanted to kind of give some of the science around that, because there's a lot of data on that. There's the ACE study, and there's sort of a lot of science coming out previously and currently about it's a real thing. It's not just kind of like something somebody came up with. There's data that shows, and so we discussed that to a certain extent in the film with numbers and graphs and things like that. Hi, Edie, you're back. You're okay. You're muted, but you're back.
I apologize. I don't know what happened. It just wouldn't
That's
let me back
okay.
in.
That's okay. I feel better with you here. I was just going over the ACE study and the correlation. And then lastly, is just talking about the main themes of our film. It was very important for us to end on an upbeat note and to have the film be an upbeat film, because there are a lot of films out there that shine a light on addiction and active users and the destruction that addiction is wreaking on, and you know, on communities across the country. We thought, well, let's shine a light on what is being done about it, how communities are pulling together, and how people in recovery are, you know, always offering a hand to those still struggling, and some of the ways that they're helping. And to just say that, like, you know, we've got some people here in long-term recovery, as well as, you know, more recently, their lives have been enriched and transformed by their ability to get into recovery. It is possible. It is going to happen for you if you know, if you give it a chance and you get treatment, and you know, as Steve said, there's, you know, many pathways to recovery, with MAT definitely being one of them. And there's so many people that are out there ready and willing to help. It's not a perfect situation yet. Hopefully with the next, well, I won't get political, but let's just say that it's getting better, and there's more treatment available. There's more funding. Big Pharma is, you know, paying for some of it. And so we wanted to end on a hopeful note, and I hope we did that.
I don't, I would just add, 'cause I'm sorry, I missed some of what was said before, but the destigmatization that Steve was talking about is very important. And I think our movie tries, by showing the roots, and I apologize if I'm repeating something Tory has already said, but by focusing on roots of people's suffering, because it really is emotional pain that is being treated in all these cases very often. And that when people understand that, people being the broader audience out there of people that they understand where the suffering is coming from, and that people are just trying to, that turn to drugs or other substances, are looking for a way to feel normal and that healthy, happy. And that when the audiences understand that, it's a very different, they take a very different perspective on what it is to be suffering from this. And that helps to take away the stigma. I've had so many people come up to me that saw early screenings of when we were in the beginning of all this, that commented about how they had no idea, or they never, and even with loved ones and their families, they didn't look at it the same way afterwards, after seeing the film. So we're hoping that but we don't minimize the suffering on some level. It just is the underlying theme is that there's better ways, like Steve was saying also, to treat this, because we're not doing it the right way. And these people should be looked up to and understood and have sympathy. We have some empathy for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One of the questions I had for you folks was, how easy was it for you, or difficult, to get people to open up in front of a camera? And so I kind of like to talk to the movie makers first regarding that. And then Rob, I'd like to get your perspective on it, okay? Steve, you said, you already mentioned the fact that you couldn't find a Black person. And so can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, one thing I've found in making my films, that I found the eloquence of the regular person. That if people are talking about something that they know about personally, and they feel, and they know how they feel, and I found this in my immigration film and my police film, and also in this film, that just regular people are eloquent, they're direct, they communicate masterfully. It's because they're not trying anything. They're not, it just comes naturally. And I find when people speak naturally, they speak very honestly and very effectively. And that was certainly true of Ada. Ada is, I'll pass to her, but, Ada has very strong feelings, and she was not going to put up with the status quo. And I think, Ada, the way you just as yourself started reaching out and communicating with people and telling them this can't be, I'll pass it to you on that one. How did you feel so strong that you could communicate so directly and the way you did, both in the film and in the world?
Well, I guess because I was so passionate about it. I saw what it did to my son. I saw what it did to other people. At the time that my son was addicted, like I said, he was such a good kid. He was, I'm not just saying this because he was my son. He is my son, but because he never gave me any trouble. Never had a problem with him. He was always liked by all the teachers. He always got good marks. He always made the honor roll. Never had a problem. And then all of a sudden, bam, he changed. And I saw that change in front of me. And then, all of a sudden I started finding out about the opioids and the drugs. And then I found out about what it does to people. And I started seeing in the newspapers that people were passing away, and all these young children, all these young people were dying, and people started coming out with it and talking about it. And I guess I was on the front lines. Like, I was one of the first ones that was like, I called the pharmaceutical company as soon as I found out. My son opened up to me and told me that he was taking Opama or Opana. It was some heavy pain pill. And he got it from somebody that had a family member that had cancer. And that was what got him started on it. Now, my son has a high, he is, I guess he has a high tendency to get addicted because we have it in my family. And he had Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease as a child, very bad. He had Lyme meningitis. So, and he was very shy and introverted. So this was the perfect drug for him. And when I spoke on the film, I listened to the other parents, you know, when I saw the film, and one of the mothers said it was an evil entity, that fentanyl was evil. And I truly believe that, just from everything about it, from the way it's made, from the way it's distributed. I was so angry at the point of that film that, you know, I was the Connecticut chair for the Addiction Policy Forum. I was an ambassador, one of the first ambassadors for Shatterproof. I attended under Governor Malloy several panels. I've been to Washington. I was, and I still am, a strong advocate for it. And I will continue to do so, because I don't think it's going away, and I don't think it's getting any better. My son, thankfully, he's doing well. He did relapse again, but he was able to be honest about it, and he went into a rehab and got out, and he's still doing well. So, but this, what somebody had said about putting people in prison, that I think is the worst thing you can do for anybody with any kind of addiction problems. It does nothing. And in fact, what it does, it makes the trauma worse. So I'm going to leave it at that, but it does.
Okay, thank you, Max.
You're welcome.
And
Whatever.
Rob, would you like to tell us a little bit about what your experience was in deciding to be in that film and being in it?
Sure. I actually had been a client of Hope's since 2009, shortly after I returned from 90 days of treatment in Mississippi. And the opportunity came up. And for me, it was very easy to be a part of this because it actually was the chance I had been looking for to share my story, because I grew up in a family that was all about secrets. My mom was an alcoholic. She died at 59 of the disease. And still many people in our extended family don't realize that she had an alcohol problem because of the way, that my family tried to hide it. So, I grew up with a lot of shame, and that carried over when I became addicted to the pills, because I thought, this can't be me. So I can't let anybody know that, this is, that I've become a drug addict. So that kept me from getting into treatment for about 6 years. But I just love it. I was fortunate to have worked with Hope for years, including doing EMDR, which is a therapy that I use to address trauma. Helped me a great deal. Participating in this film helped me a great deal, because I can't remember who said it earlier, but maybe it was Tory. Trauma, to me, I was sexually abused when I was a young kid, and that wasn't the trauma to me. I even understood at that age. I was 7, 8, 9 years old. I knew this was wrong. I knew what this guy was doing was wrong. I didn't have any shame over that. But the way that I reacted to my father's reaction to it was where the PTSD came in, and that was really, everybody thinks, oh, you sexually abused, or as Tory said, or maybe it was Steve, that you go to war and you come back because you witnessed awful things. That's where the PTSD is. It's not really that. For me, it was how I, perceived the reaction of the people that I felt were there to protect me and help me through this. So to get this out, and even as I tell it right now, I have goosebumps, because I love talking about it. It was no issue for me sharing it, because it is what it is. It's the truth, and it was cathartic. So it was I don't want to make it sound simple or easy, but for me it was.
Thank you. Edie, would you like to add anything more along this topic? You're
I know I've been so you don't have to hear background noise here, but I think all our participants dealt with it in different ways. But I think I'll give Tory and Hope a lot of credit here for also just putting together questions that made sense. And I think the group, and Rob, tell me if you think I'm wrong, but they were all great. They wanted to share their stories. So the combination of just, I think, trusting Tory and Hope in their approach to filming made people comfortable enough. And I think it, like Rob said, it was cathartic for everyone, including the people making the film.
right. Yeah. No, they were great. They were great, and they were so. This is why I asked the question about, did you have trouble finding those people to be in front of the camera, because they were just so open, and I couldn't really believe it that these people were so willing to come out and
well, when Hope first wanted to put this together, she I don't know if you guys talked about this already, Tory, let me know if I'm repeating, but that she asked some people she knew, but then she put out, it was kind of a blind ask, and I think she was really stunned by the number of people. They had to be in recovery, but they had to have suffered some sort of form of substance abuse addiction, and had an early childhood trauma or trauma of some sort. And the response, I think, blew her away, because I think she had 13 people at least, maybe more. She had to turn some away to have this. She was not expecting that initially. So it shows you that people, they want to share this. They want to talk about it with other people to help other people. It's a big part of our film, I think, is helping other people.
Right.
Through your experience.
Yeah, in both cases it is. I'm going to kind of open it up to you guys now, because we are already going over our time, but because we got a late start, we can push it out a little bit further. So I want you to jump in, and what else do you want to say about your films, both of which were just awesome.
I have a topic to discuss. I mean, there have been several film festivals where the film initially wasn't selected, but then I called them and I said, how could you not show this film? And Shireen said, whenever we show films about addiction and drugs, no one comes. And what I think we're going back to stigma. People don't want to look. They want to turn away. They don't want to understand. They don't want to think about it. It's just too awful to think about. So our challenge is to somehow deal with that, because the solutions to the problem are there. They're here. The treatments are here. The infrastructure of care is here. The knowledge about the addiction is here. But how do we change minds? How do we deal with the stigma, and how do we get people not to look away? Now, in my case, I made a film that was easy to look away from because it had such harsh elements in it. Your film, I thought, was much more palatable, but I still feel like we as the people who care about this, all of us on this page, we have to figure out something else. We have to figure out some other strategies that will help change minds. And I toss that out there. It's not that I have one. I want one.
Mm-hmm.
Any ideas?
It's about getting the word out. You're absolutely right. And I apologize. I haven't had a chance to watch your film yet, Steve, but I'm very anxious to, because I think all these things work together on some level. And your story sounds like it's extremely important. It's a very important part of the whole package, and how do you get it out there and get the word out? And now in the time of COVID, when people are having to stay inside and it's harder to get it out there, I think people don't want to watch something that's going to be even more depressing than maybe what they're dealing with right now. So yeah, you're right. And what's happening is that the irony, of course, is that it's for people suffering from addiction, the COVID's made it worse. And this is when you need to be on top of it even more. So I'm not answering your question in terms of ideas, but I think as part of a community of filmmakers that we need to not let it fall in the background and disappear.
Yeah. Well, one thought is that in the schools and the community halls, these kind of films need to be shown.
Yes.
The DEA people, they have a film that they show in schools in Connecticut, and the DEA people in New Haven said, this is not the film we should be showing.
Right.
So somehow the wrong messages are getting out, and it's just, within the bureaucracy, it's hard to change the message. But I think we have to work on it.
Schools were a very important place to target. We had actually the superintendent of Region 1, which is the school district up by us, come in, and she was very intrigued by the ACE study, which is part of our film, and how would you implement that? These are all things that educators should know. They should be seeing signs of what might be happening in school. Like Anita was talking about her son. Kids are so good at hiding stuff. It's just amazing. But if you know what to be looking for, it might be one step in stopping something, right? So how do you do that? What's the movie you're talking about? Is it the Dragon one that what is the DEA's?
I think that's it.
And is your film, since I haven't seen it, do you think that schools would be okay with it, even though that has grim stuff?
It might be too rough. Well, it would be too rough for a middle school. It wouldn't be too rough for
a high school.
High school, yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to say one more thing. I love your film, and I love lots of things about it. But the moment I loved the best was when the dad and daughter were sitting on a bench together, and they were talking, and they were both talking at the same time. And it wasn't just for a moment. It was just like they kept talking at the same time. And their love, their interest, their love for each other came out so strong. It really was one of the most beautiful things I've seen in a documentary. That it made 20 seconds of pure humanity at its best.
Thank you.
Yes, it was wonderful.
And
Thank you.
Tory said, we weren't sure you were going to put that in, and it was just it was a good decision, because so many things in our editing process, because we were sort of new to all this stuff, got thrown out that we said, wait a minute, we need to put that back in, and we had somebody that threw it out, and we went, wait a minute, we've lost the soul of the movie, and that's a perfect example of that. Yeah.
I have to jump in now because we are pushing up against the next group. So thank you so much for participating here today. You do great work. It was just marvelous watching those films. Thank you. And best of luck to you going forward.
Well, thank you to Mystic Film Festival for having us and, supporting us. And, we can't do this alone. So Thank you so much.
It takes a village.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Rob.
Ada.
Steve.
Best of
Ada.
luck.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Great.
Kevin. All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.